Good morning, and welcome to this morning's webinar, Introducing a Free Solution for Automating the SharePoint Site Creation Process. Glad you could be with us today. I'm Randy Moody, Customer Service Manager and part of the marketing team here at PremierPoint Solutions. And joining me for today's presentation is Aaron Wood, Software Engineering and Support Manager for our software division. This morning's webinar will last about an hour, and that will include a time for Q&A. We invite you to enter any questions you have as we go along through our broadcast today into the question field of your GoToWebinar toolbar on the right-hand side. If you are not familiar with the interface, you just expand it by clicking on the white arrow that's on the orange background near the top of that little tool, and then go down to the question field. Anytime during the broadcast, we welcome you to enter your questions. Before we jump into today's broadcast, we'd like to find out a little bit about you, our audience. That'll help us to tailor today's presentation to the needs of our audience. So we'd like to find out who's in the audience today, who's attending. If you'd please weigh in, let us know your position in your organization. Thank you very much. Looks like all but 7% of you are either IT people, managers, or both. Another quick question. Which version of SharePoint is your organization currently using? Just another couple seconds here. Thank you for your input. And it looks like the majority of you in today's webinar are using SharePoint 2010. About a third of you are using SharePoint 2013, and a significant number are still on SharePoint 2007. That's interesting. Just so that you'll know, when we do our demo portion of our presentation today, we'll be using the SharePoint 2013 interface to be able to do that demo. So if it looks unfamiliar to you and you're using an earlier version, that's the reason why. And one last quick poll, and then we'll leave you alone for a little bit. In terms of the needs of your organization, how many new SharePoint site collections are required to be created each month? Thank you for your participation. And it looks like about an even split between 0 to 10 and 10 to 50. Thank you very much. SharePoint's catching on in your organization. And now, all of a sudden, everybody wants their own SharePoint site collection, right? Now, somebody has got to create all those new site collections. And who is that going to be? Really, there are only a couple of options. Organizations with lots of SharePoint site collections or a need for lots of them find they have an important choice to make. They can either empower their users to create their own site collections by enabling the self-service site creation feature of SharePoint. Let's see a show of hands now. How many of you think that sounds like a great idea? Yeah, I didn't think so. Don't think we need a poll to answer that. Or the other option is they can establish a controlled SharePoint environment requiring that their users request a new site collection and then have the IT department manually approve, create, and provision each one, configuring its features, limitations, and security according to its intended purpose and use. We call that the lockdown approach. Under the anarchy approach, site collections are randomly created by users as needed without regard to standards or guidelines of any kind. They spring up like weeds, and like weeds, they quickly grow out of control. These random autonomous sites and site collections are characterized by a lack of order, a lack of uniformity and consistency, a lack of cohesiveness, and tendency to be used for a period of time and then abandoned. We call this condition site sprawl, and it's every CIO's nightmare. Hundreds or even thousands of unique sites and site collections without governance of any kind. In the second approach, the lockdown approach, that places a huge burden on the IT staff as site collection requests accumulate and the lengthy process of manual creation and provisioning ensues, one site collection at a time. The IT staff has to approve and create each one individually, making sure it's plugged into the right place in the organizational hierarchy and taxonomy, making sure it has all the right functionality for the team that's requesting it, making sure it adheres to the organization's standards of governance and compliance, and so on and so on. The burden on the IT department for organizations using the lockdown approach can seem overwhelming. In the anarchy approach, where everyone pretty much does whatever they want, the users feel empowered, but the IT department is frenetic, trying to deal with the numerous problems that this approach produces. In the lockdown approach, the users feel powerless and become frustrated because it can take weeks or even months for their requests to be approved and acted on. And while the IT department feels more in control, it quickly becomes overburdened with the load of trying to manufacture each site collection manually and ensure that the proper controls are in place. Not to mention the pressure of the backlog of requests that continue to pile up. For most organizations, these two approaches seem to be the only alternatives. The anarchy approach, which results in a disjointed, chaotic accumulation of hundreds or even thousands of autonomous sites strewn randomly across the SharePoint landscape. The users feeling empowered, but the IT department ending up frenetically trying to keep up with fixing the sites and cleaning up the mess. Or the lockdown approach, which results in a seemingly insurmountable mountain of backlogged work for the IT department and also ends up making a lot of people angry and unhappy. Both the IT people who are constantly laboring to try to catch up with the work and the users themselves who are often waiting weeks for their site collections to be provisioned so that they can use them. We say enough. Let's put a stop to the mind-numbing busy work of manually creating new site collections. Let's free up our IT staff so they can do what we've hired them to do. Let's give our users a site collection vending machine, a self-service site creation with protection in place to keep them from fooling with the knobs and switches. And let's make it free and easy so you can have this vending machine set up and working in just minutes. A self-service site collection vending machine? Yes. An automated solution which takes the capabilities and limitations that you, the administrator, specify and dispenses site after site with the functionality the users need, but with your governance and uniformity standards strictly in force. And yes, you heard me right, it's free. Absolutely free. Well, we'd like to show you that machine. It's Site Provisioning and Governance Assistant Free Edition for SharePoint. We call it SPGA Free. It is your site collection vending machine. SPGA Free is available for both SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint 2010. and for SharePoint Foundation as well as SharePoint Server. SPGA Free is easy. In just a moment, we're going to show you how this breakthrough self-service site collection creation solution is easy to install, easy to set up, easy to use, and a huge time and money saver. Let's talk for a moment about how it works. The SPGA process. Just as a vending machine has to be loaded before it can be used, there are two sides to the SPGA process, a user side and an administrator side. In a nutshell, administrators prepare site request profiles for different kinds of SharePoint site collections in advance, with all the appropriate settings, both for functionality and limitations, baked in. These are stored in a provisioning management site. Users then select the appropriate request profile for the kind of site collection they need, and they fill out a short request form which sets into motion the process. Workflows then automate the approval of the request and the creation and provisioning of the site collection, enforcing compliance, governance, and uniformity. So here's how this process flows. The user selects from the available request profiles the type most appropriate for the site collection they want to request. The user is presented with a series of questions which are defined by the request profile's input fields. Once each question is answered, the request is submitted and saved to the provisioning management site. If an approval workflow has been defined, it launches to begin the automated approval process. Once the request is approved, the new site is automatically created and configured according to the predefined plan as the workflow progresses. The result is a ready-to-use SharePoint site collection built according to the user's needs and limited by the boundaries set in advance by the administrator. Governance and uniformity enforced, and the site collection created and provisioned in a timely and efficient manner. Everybody wins. Self-service site collections dispensed to users automatically, on demand, like a site collection vending machine. Well, it's time now for us to see SPGA Free Edition in action. Aaron Wood is going to demonstrate the product for us, both from the administrator side and from the user side. So I'm going to turn it over now to Aaron and let him do that very thing. Aaron?
Okay, thank you, Randy. Let me get my screen shared. Well, I'm excited to show you all SPGA Free and just how fast and easy you can get it up and running, provisioning new site collections, and to demonstrate just how fast that you can be up and running with those free requests, we're going to start the demo completely from scratch by installing the product and setting up our first request. A little risky for a demo, but we feel confident we can get it up and running very quickly, and you can do the same in your environment, so that's what we're going to show you today. And then we'll go back and add an approval workflow, and then make some other common customizations to show you how easily you can adapt it to meet your specific needs. So what you should be seeing on your screen now is a clean SharePoint Server 2013 environment when running Windows Server 2012 R2. And I've gone ahead and created one web application, and we're going to deploy SPGA to that one. And I have gone ahead and downloaded the bits from the PremierPoint Solutions website. So at this point, you would be ready to start your installation process. You can see the executable here on my desktop. Now, depending on your user access control settings and the account that you log in with, you might need to right-click and run as administrator. So we're going to go ahead and run it in this manner as well. And you'll be presented with this splash screen. And you can read the license terms and check the box to agree. At that point, the install button is activated. We're just going to click that. And that initial part goes through and installs the license manager and drops some of the components that we're going to deploy out to the server. The next step in the process is to click Configure. And once we're presented with this screen, we're simply going to run the SPGA configuration wizard. And this is going to actually deploy the solution to our farm. So we're just going to click Next. It does a little pre-installation check to make sure everything's ready and in place. We passed all of those. We'll click Next. At this point, you can spend a little time reading the license agreement, check the box, and click Next. And we're presented with the one application, web application that I mentioned I'd already set up. If you had multiple web applications, you can certainly check the boxes to go ahead and deploy it to as many of those as you'd like. We'll go ahead and click Next. And at this point, it will begin the deployment process. As you know, with most farm solutions, this one's going to take just a couple of minutes to process. There's actually two solutions that will be installed to your farm at this point. There's the administration solution and then just the SPGA assistant solution. And those two work together. While that's deploying, let me go ahead and mention that one of the things it does as this solution is deployed is creates a new template called SPGA provisioning template. And you can use that template to create a top-level site at a site collection, or you can also use it as a sub-site within an existing site collection. As soon as this completes, we'll go ahead and create using a new site collection and make our provisioning site the root site of that collection. I'll also go ahead and mention you can have as many of those as you would like. Looks like that's completed successfully. We'll click Next. And we can exit out. The product has been installed and deployed. I'll go ahead and refresh the screen here for central administration. As you know, when we deploy a farm solution, it automatically recycles the app pool, so it'll take it just a moment to spin up. And as I mentioned with those provisioning sites, you can have as many as you'd like. So however many makes sense. We have many customers that only utilize one provisioning site, and we have some that create several. If you want to lock that down based on security or some other type of information architecture within your organization, you can certainly do that. For demo purposes, we're just going to create one new collection. Should just be a moment longer. There we go. So we'll click Create Site Collection. And this screen should be familiar. We're here in our one web application. I'm going to title this SPGA Provisioning. We'll skip a description for now. I'm going to create it under the /sites default managed path, and we'll just call it SPGA. So now we know our provisioning site will be created at intranet/sites/SPGA. And you'll see that new provisioning tab that I mentioned. And within that, here's the provisioning management site. I'm going to add an administrator. And we'll also add our fictional SharePoint administrator named Alan. And I'll click OK to begin that correct. I misspelled administrator. Let's try that again. There we go. So now that'll take a moment to go ahead and provision that site collection. There is one more step that we need to do before we'll be able to go out to that and provision new site collections. Go back into Central Administration. So SPGA deploys a service. So we're going to go to Application Management and do Manage Services on Server. Within this, you'll notice the Site Provisioning and Governance Assistant Service has been deployed. We can see that that is in a started state. I'll simply click on this. And what we're going to do is add a request source. Now this is where I said you can have multiple provisioning sites, and the only thing extra that you would need to do is come in here and add each of those as a request source. And this tells the timer job where to go and look for those new requests. For these demo purposes, we've created one site, so we're going to click Add Request Source and go ahead and add that. If you recall, we did intranet/sites/SPGA. and we can click OK. Back on the other tab, I can see our collection has been created. I'm going to click on that, so that will be spinning up while we're finishing up here. So we can see our new request source in this screen. And what we're going to do now is click on this, and we can configure the timer job to actually go and pick up the request from that site. And if you had multiple sites, you can configure the timer job to run at different intervals for each of those, which is kind of nice. You may have some that you'd like to run every 15 minutes, and some maybe would run on a nightly process, completely up to you and configurable. For demo purposes, we'll set it to run every minute so that it'll be sure and pick those up. You can also click the Run Now button if you had some requests that you needed to process immediately in your real environment. I'll go ahead and click OK. And at this point, all the configuration and deployment is done within Central Administration. Now we just need to go to the provisioning site, which has come up here. And the last step before we can actually make a request is to create a new request profile. So I'm logged in here as administrator, as you can see. And by administrator, it could be anyone that is a site collection administrator or even has owner permissions on the provisioning site. We're going to go to Site Settings. And you'll see a provisioning management section that was deployed with SPGA. There's several different things here. For the purposes of getting this rolling, we just need to go into the Request Profiles section. You can think of the request profile simply as the different types of requests that you're going to allow your users to request. So you'll have a request profile for perhaps team sites, one for project sites, one for blogs, just whatever kind of different sites that you would like your users to be able to request. You'll create a request profile for that. With the SPGA Free Edition, we ship with a template, so you don't have to start from scratch. So once we get in here, we'll select that one template that's been given to you, which will give you everything you need to create a new site collection. Back on this provisioning site, while we're waiting for that to spin up, I also want to point out that there's an assets list. An assets list is sort of an inventory of what has been created for you through your request. So you'll easily be able to go back and look and see what all was created, who requested it, who approved it, and keep track of all those governance items. By default, we'll go ahead and add some items to that, but you can also, whenever you're adding your custom fields to the request form, you can choose some of those to be promoted fields that will also be tracked in that assets list. So switching back to this, we're in the request profiles list, and this is a good time to point out that with all of our products, we try to integrate into the SharePoint interface as much as possible. So we utilize lists, so there's nothing new to learn, and the request profiles is one such item. So we're just going to simply add a new item to this request profiles list. For this first one, we're going to just call it Request New Site Collection. We're going to give it a description which would show to your users if you need to give them a little more detail on what this request does. For this one, it would be pretty simple. Make a new request for a site collection. You can add some other keys and tagging information if you'd like. And as I said, with SPGA Free, we ship with one default template, and that is to create a new site collection. And that's just to get you started. If we switch back to our provisioning home site, we now see that this new request has been added. As many requests as you add would show up in this section. One thing we're going to do on this is go ahead and give a user access so I can show it to you from the user perspective. So we'll go to our members group. We're going to add Diana. So now we know Diana has access, so I'm going to switch over to another system. We'll log into the site as Diana. So the first thing I want to point out is that the execution settings link does not show up for Diana, as she only has member access. Switch back to this one. You can see here how administrators will have this execution settings, and we'll go into there and do some customizations in a moment. But I just wanted to point that out, that as a user, all they see is the request profile title, the description that you give it, and an option to make the request. Now, if you don't want to utilize this provisioning site to send your users to, you can also simply copy out that URL from the Make Request link and place that anywhere on your intranet or on team sites, or even email it, whatever makes sense for your organization if you don't want to show them all of the different request types. So for this purpose, we'll go ahead and click Make Request, and we're presented with a form. This is the default form, and you can customize it, and that's something I'll show you in just a moment. For this purpose, we'll say that Diana works in our Human Resources area, and she would like to create a new site for open enrollment. They're working on getting all the new benefits information out there, so she's going to come and create a new site for that. We'll give it a description. And with this default request profile, it's going to automatically add the requester, in this case Diana, as this primary site collection administrator. And then she has the option of adding a secondary site collection administrator right here. We'll add a user called Alan. Now that may not be something that's desirable in your environment, and that's one of the things that I'm going to show you in just a moment how we can change that. If you're not going to give your users that are requesting these site collection administration access, that's fine. We can change that and have it default to IT administrators. She knows at this time also for this site she would like to add the open enrollment team AD group, which contains all of her team members, so she's going to do that. And she'd also like to give visitor access to everyone, as once they have it in place, they're going to circulate a link so that people can go and see the new benefits options. At this point, she's ready to click Finish. And the new request has been created. If we look over here in the My Provisioning Request console, we can see that new request. We can also see the blue eye information icon. That's what will display until the timer job has picked up the request. Remember, we set ours to run every minute, so it should just be a moment here. Once it picks up the request, it will start spinning, and then we know that that request is underway. Once it completes, we'll see a green check mark there, and we know the site has been provisioned. Now in this default scenario, I have not set up approvals yet, so that's why it's going to go ahead and pick it up. And then after this, we'll go ahead and add approvals and do some other things that I think would be common customizations for a lot of users. And we can see the green check mark. That means the site collection has been provisioned already. No intervention from IT. Diana was able to get what she needed, and she can now come here and simply navigate to the site. Here we can see that description that she gave it and the title. We use the title to build the URL, so it goes to intranet/site/open enrollment. If we go out to site settings and visit people and groups, we'll see in the members group that she added her open enrollment AD group. She also requested that everyone have visitor access, so we can see that here. Back into Site Collection Administrator, we'll be able to see that it added Diana and it also added Alan. So you are now up and running with SPGA Free from install to provisioning sites. Pretty cool, right? Now I know there's some other customizations, like I said, that you may want to do, so we're going to go ahead and add those in at this time. I know one of the most common would be to allow an approval process, so we're going to set that up. First thing we need to do is in this provisioning site, go and enable the Workflows Site Collection feature. As I said, we try to integrate with SharePoint completely so that you don't have anything new to learn whenever possible. And one such is that we can utilize the default We now want to go back out to our request list. And just like any other SharePoint list, we will add a workflow just like we would any other list. So the first thing that we would need to do on this list is go to the versioning settings. And in here we want to require content approval for submitted items. And the second step in the process would be to go ahead and add that workflow. In this case, we're going to use just the out-of-the-box approval workflow. You can use designer workflows as well if you'd like to get a little bit more complex. We have a lot of customers of this product that would add some input fields, and based on those inputs, perhaps there would be different approvers, and so you can use designer to create that. Here, we're just going to create a simple approval. Call it SPGA approval workflow. I'm going to uncheck this box and tell it to automatically run the workflow whenever we create a new item. For the demo, we're going to have Alan be our approver for all of these collections. And you can put as many of these options in as you like. I'm going to skip through there. The key one is to enable content approval, and this just says that once the task has been approved, that the approval status will automatically be changed in that list. And that's what's going to allow SPGA to pick up the request and provision the site. So now let's go and test that out. I'll switch back here as Diana. We'll make a new request. We'll keep this one simple. Testing approval. We'll add Alan and click Finish. Now the only real way to show you that this is working is by continually looking over here and just noticing that within a minute or two this hasn't begun to spin up. SPGA will go and look at the interval you set in the timer job, which we have set to 1 minute, and until it sees it in that approval status, it's not going to actually provision it though. So it continues to look, and once that it sees it's in the approved status, it will go ahead and pick that up. So while we're proving to you that it's now awaiting approval, we'll go ahead and do some of those other customizations that I mentioned. So we're going to do quite a few on these. So let's say that we want to change the site definition. By default, it uses the blank site definition. Let's say we want to change that to a team site definition. And let's say we don't want to let our requesters be site collection admins or assign site collection admins. We want our SharePoint administrators to be those collection admins. Let's also say we want to set a site quota so that our database doesn't run out of control. And let's also add a drop-down box and let the user select a department and have that provisioned to a custom managed path based on that department. So as an administrator, you would go to your provisioning site and click Execution Settings. And you can see some input fields here, and this is what populates the form. Again, if you can manage a SharePoint list, then you can add and remove fields here in group headings. I'm going to come back and we're going to adapt some of these in a moment. But we're going to skip on down to our activities, and this is where the real magic happens within SPGA, and it tells it what to do, when to create the site collection, where to create it, and what to do with it. The key one we're going to change here to change the site definition is the Create Site Collection activity. Again, we populate all of this for you by default, so all you're going to do is use that default request profile template and come in here and make adjustments so that you don't have to know what to put in all of these boxes. So once you begin using SPGA, you'll see that it does flow pretty easily. So here's the key box for this, site definition. It's currently using site definitions.blank. So we're going to click on this function button. And we're going to go to our global properties. This is where we store all of the information related to site definitions. And you can see here we have the SharePoint default ones loaded for you. If you have custom site definitions, you can certainly add your own and be able to select those here. As I said, we're going to make it use the team site definition, so we'll click OK. We also wanted to change the primary and secondary site collection administrators. You can see here how it uses the request created by, so that's why it was default into Diana. We're just going to wipe this out and make our SharePoint administrator 1. And you would adapt these fields as well. For time's sake, I'm just going to skip through these. And here's our secondary site collection administrator. We can see where that was using an input field called secondary administrator from our form. So we're going to wipe that out, and we're going to use Alan. So now we're going to add our administrator and Alan as our primary and secondary site collection administrators on all of the requests for this particular profile. At this point we can click Save. Another thing I mentioned was adding a quota. So I've previously set up a site collection quota called Small Team Site. In this one I set it up to only allow 1 gig of space to be used and to send warnings at the 800 megabyte level. So we're going to come in here and add a new activity. Now what you'll see when you come to this screen is a search box to search for activities. For the free version, we push these all to the top. And you can see those that they are active and we can choose from them. You'll also notice the Premium Edition activities below. You can see there are several more things you can do there. But again, we think the free edition offers you a lot of value and the things that you can do to get those provisioned. And then you can have a look at these premium features as well at some point if you'd like. So for this, we're going to do Apply Site Collection Quota. Click that function button. Yeah, one thing I'll point out here is that it won't let you select incorrect things. We know that it's not giving us a site collection URL from any of our inputs. So that's why there's no option there. If I click Execution Properties, it's only going to give me a property that is a site collection URL. I'll click OK. And here I'll specify that quota template that I created. Small Team Site was the name I gave it, and we'll click Save. So now we have a quota. We've changed to the primary and secondary site collection administrators will be. We've changed the site definition. And the last thing I mentioned that we would do is modify these input fields. Again, you can add as many of these as you would like to gather the information that you need. For this purpose, I'm going to add a new field. It's a choice field. And again, just like that activity screen, you can see where we have the free edition field showing, and you can see that we also have some custom editions that we do in the premium version. But here's our choice field, and we'll click OK. We'll call this Department. We know a user probably won't be familiar with what a SharePoint Managed Path is, but they do know their department, and that's how you have segmented it in your environment. So we'll set that. I've added IT, HR, and Marketing Managed Paths. We'll set this to be a drop-down menu and click Save. And one thing we want to do as well is remove this secondary site administrator field as we're no longer using it. We'll simply click Delete. And I'll go ahead and get rid of that heading as well. At this point, our request profile is ready. I'm going to switch back over as Diana. And just let me point out that this request still has not been processed, so it is awaiting approval. We'll go and approve that in a moment and show you that. As Diana, I'm going to go ahead and click Make Request. Again, to her, the process is pretty much the same. For this one, we're going to pretend that Diana now works in IT for our SQL Server team. And she just needs a new SQL Server team site. Here's that drop-down we created. We're going to select IT for this one. And we know that she has a AD group for her team as well. Here's that SQL Server team. We're going to add it. And that's all that we're going to do at this point. We'll click Finish. Now again, this is awaiting Alan's approval now, so we're going to switch back over as an administrator. Now in your environment, you will likely have email set up, obviously. Alan would receive an email where he can go in and approve the task that way. For our purposes, we're going to need to go to the list and just approve these requests. And you can see that one is now changed to the approved approval status. So this is what SPGA looks for. As soon as it sees that approved status, it's going to go ahead and pick it up and provision that site. You can see that first one we made as a test is still pending. I'm going to go ahead and approve it as well. And it looks like I went ahead and approved that one right before the job picked up. So it's already spinning up and being created. If we go into the execution details, we can actually come in here and see exactly what step we are on. You can see here it opened the web app after setting the URL. We'll let that finish up. I also noticed one thing that I did not do, and that was change where it was going to be created. That activity would be right here where it sets the site URL. One of the things that we did by default is go ahead and make a friendly URL for you. We know that some users may type in a title that has some characters you wouldn't want. And since we're creating the URL from that, we go ahead and use this toFriendly URL function. And that goes ahead and uses the site title they give it, but strips out any characters we wouldn't want in any spaces so that we're not filled with a bunch of %20s and other characters. The one thing I don't want you to get scared off by adding variables here, we simply need to add a $sign if it's an input field or any type of variable, and we're going to do inputs, and we're going to use that field name we used, which was department. And what this does is now it tells, instead of creating the site at /sites, it says to create it at utilizing the field that we created for department instead of using /site. So that way it'd be organized by IT or HR or whatever would make sense in your organization. So let's go back and see, okay, so that site has been created now. We'll go ahead and visit the site, and we should see that it's now using the team site definition. And we know that we had to use the workflows. I can't show you the quotas here on this side, and for time's sake I won't pop back into central administration, but we know it's now using our quota. If we go into site settings as the administrator, we'll see that Diana doesn't exist here anymore. It's the administrator and Alan, and it's using these characters because I didn't add an email address and login name. That's fine. So now we've locked the site down a better way. And I can show you the site permissions as well as we added that AD group. And here's our SQL Server AD team showing up in the members group. So that's part of this, the demo is complete, and I just wanted to show you how you can start from scratch, installing, creating profiles, adding workflows, and customizing various things. And I hope I have adequately demonstrated how easy it is to use this free tool and something that could help you out in your SharePoint environments. At this point, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Randy to wrap up the webinar, and then we'll do a question session at the end.
All right, thank you, Aaron. So as you can see, the vending machine is actually very simple to set up. And every step that Aaron took you through in his demonstration is clearly explained in the online documentation. The site collection process happens very quickly, as you've seen, so that the new site collection is ready for the users to begin working with it in a very short time. Organizations of many different types and sizes can benefit from SPGA Free. Well, we don't simply want you to take our word for what SPGA can do for your organization. We urge you to download it and see for yourself in your own test environment. The link that's on the bottom of the slide you're looking at will appear on your screen for the next few minutes, and we'll also be sending it to you in a follow-up email. Getting started with this free product is easy. Just download the installation file, request a permanent license key, which we'll send you by return email, and then install and begin using the product. There are 2 levels of support available for the free edition of SPGA. Document-based support is absolutely free, and the support documentation is detailed and excellent. If, however, you prefer or feel more comfortable with live support, you may purchase premium level technical support for a fee. Our premium level support is through a Zendesk ticket system staffed by domestic PremierPoint Solutions professional support engineers who respond to support requests within 24 hours. The fee-based premium support is priced at $500 per year per server. The company bringing you today's webinar and the SPGA free product is PremierPoint Solutions. We are a SharePoint-focused company located in Nashville, Tennessee. We're the creator of award-winning SharePoint add-on software to extend and enhance SharePoint's functionality. And our list of satisfied software clients includes very familiar names like IBM, Best Buy, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the United States Army and Air Force, Federal Express, and even Microsoft. One last poll, if you'd be so kind. And that is, does SPGA look like a product which would be useful in your organization? Thank you very much for your participation. It looks like a very high percentage of you said that it looks like it would be the kind of a product that could be very useful for you. That's good for us to hear. We'll be sending you links to further information on SPGA Free by follow-up email very soon, including the slide deck of today's presentation, a link to the SPGA Free product page and features page, the SPGA product documentation, and a link, of course, to download it. So be watching for all of this coming soon to an inbox near you. Again, we encourage you, if you haven't done so, if you have a question, please enter it in the questions field of the GoToWebinar tool on the right-hand side of your screen. And we're going to take time now to answer your questions. While we're doing that, we encourage you to go ahead and download the product right now. Why not? The link is right there on your screen. You can go there, download the product, and get started right away with SPGA Free. I'm going to bring Aaron back in to answer some of the questions here, and we'll go ahead and take a look at those. All right, Aaron, Kyle wants to know, are we talking about sites or site collections?
Okay, good question. Right, for the free edition, it is site collections. In the premium edition, you can do either one, site collection or subsites, but the free edition is limited to site collections. And we found that was the most common use case was people creating new team and project sites, and most companies were using separate site collections, so that's why we decided to go ahead and go with site collections for that.
All right, Greg wants to know, can you explain multi-server farm install at a high level?
Sure, that's a good question. One I'm sure others would want to know, since I only demoed it on a single server. It follows basically everything that I did there. The only additional step you would need to do is related to the license management, and that is you would go ahead and run the that setup exe, the first piece of it. You would run that on each additional server as that deploys the license manager. Everything else is taken care of through the configuration, which you only have to run one time on one server. So it's pretty simple. All your other servers, you would just go run that first part, which just took just a few seconds, and you'd have to enter in the license key that we provide you on each of those servers, and then you'd be up and running in a multi-server farm.
Okay, I'm not sure about this one. Mike asks, is there an upgrade pricing option for SharePoint 2013 from SharePoint 2010?
Okay, well, it's free, so you can upgrade for free. I don't know if we're just talking about the premium edition there, or the free edition, but everything's completely free, and it is available. I was demoing it in 2013, but it is available in 2010 as well. And yeah, you're welcome to grab one or both of those if you would like. For the, if you were referring to the premium edition, then let's say you are a 2010 customer, then yes, there is upgrade pricing. That's not the full price. I'm not the salesperson, but there is a discount for that to upgrade if you're using premium. But again, this free one is completely free for either version.
Okay, thank you. Greg is curious about what is in the paid version that's not in the free version.
Yeah, so this one we've really focused on the free edition, and we're probably going to alternate the webinars and do one on the premium edition. We do have a page on our website that we can be sure it goes out in the email to everybody. that does a side-by-side comparison. There are quite a few more activities. The one we've already touched on is that you can do sites or site collections, but there's a lot. In total, there's 50-something activities available with the premium one, including applying site templates and activating features and adding lists and list items and changing permissions and all kind of things like that. I'd say the best way to see that is to go out to the website and just check out that side-by-side comparison.
Great. Judy wants to know, how does this work with Office 365?
Well, thanks for that question, Judy, but the answer is it does not. This is, we deploy as a farm solution, and we're for on-premise or Azure-hosted SharePoint environments where you have control at that level. So it's not a product that would work with Office 365 at this point.
All right, thank you, Judy. And Greg again wants to know, can you also explain if you can set which content database the sites are created in?
And that is one of the features that's available in the Premium Edition. You can specify where it creates it. With the Free Edition, you cannot specify it at the time of the request.
Great. Any other questions at all? I think we've answered everything in the list so far. Last opportunity to ask one on the air. Of course, you're welcome to always address your questions to us, and simply email them to softwaresales@PremierPointSolutions.com, and we'll be happy to give you answers to any of the questions you have about either the Free Edition or the Premium Edition of our SPGA product. We'll stick around for a couple more minutes just in case there are any other questions that anybody might have. In the meantime, we so much appreciate you taking the time to spend with us during today's webinar. We hope that this has been informative and helpful for you. And most of all, we hope that you'll go ahead and download this free product and begin using and enjoying it. We think it can be of tremendous benefit to many organizations, and we'd love for you to go ahead and deploy it and see what it can do for you. Thanks again, and have a great day. Okay, here's another question. Steve wants to know, will this webinar be recorded and available to us for future reference? And the answer is yes, absolutely yes, Steve. We will make it available, and we'll try and give you a link to that in the follow-up email that we send out.